Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, good evening, whatever. We're really lucky today to have Jim Gale and Matt Britt from Food Forest Abundance with us. And we're going to hear from Jim, who's the founder, and Matt, who works with Jim, about what they're doing. And it's incredible what they're doing. I have been saying for a long time now that the homestead movement is the real deal. And long before we had a pandemic, I felt that United States, Canada, Mexico, I mean, you name the country, it doesn't really matter, should be more independent in terms of many things, not just food, but certainly food is important. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I like to eat. And most people do. So I have been involved with the backyard homestead movement probably for more than a decade. And my oldest son, Jim and Matt and everybody, Andrew Firestone, is an economist, quite a senior economist now, I think, with the government of Australia, the national government in Australia. He lives in Canberra with his family, but he's been an urban farmer for many, many years. And because he's also an economist, he told me, and he did some calculations, I got them somewhere on my computer. He told me that, Jim, you'll like this, and Matt, he told me that when you grow your own food in your backyard or on your property somewhere, and the ROI is something like 1,000% per year. And I said, I don't know anything that's 1,000% per year, but he tells me it's really extraordinary. And it's not that long ago, probably, you know, a generation or maybe even 2 generations ago, but probably just a generation ago, where pretty much everybody had a backyard homestead. You know, they were growing tomatoes or grapes or fruits and vegetables and nuts. But so that goes without saying that maybe we should go back there. The other thing that I've done, Jim, just to give you a bit more background on me and to put some perspective on this, is I've been involved with the Russian Dachnik movement for quite a long time, longer than a decade. And I guess today maybe using the word Russian in a sentence is not exactly being popular. But the fact is that the Russian Dachnik movement has been around for 1,000 years. And Dachnik is just a Russian word for gardener. And during the 80 years of communist rule in what was then the Soviet Union, literally a handful of gardeners with 1 hectare sites were supplying, I think, something like half of the food for the entire country. And if it weren't for the backyard homesteader or the Russian Dachnik movement, I think the Soviet Union, many people would have starved to death. So it's very, very important. One other thing, as Matt knows, and pretty much everybody on the call except you, Jim, knows, is I teach something called animation. And it's not Disney animation. It's taking a piece of real estate, maybe your principal residence, maybe a rental property, whatever, and animating it, adding new revenue streams. And part of that, I think, should be you know, the backyard homestead, because like my oldest son, Andrew, says, the return on it is insanely high. So I'm really interested in it. And then I had a chance, Jim, to work with or talk to Matt with Sean Sweeney. Sean, are you on the call here? Yes, I see Sean there. Maybe you could put your camera on, Sean. And Sean Sweeney is developing 110-acre farm, which will be part farm, but also you know, an academy where he can teach people about growing stuff, but also teach people. He's a high-level tennis coach, and he wants to teach people tennis and pickleball and maybe some other sports as well. So he'll have a sports academy and a farm. It's a great combination, in my opinion. Wow. And we were thinking, Jim, about, you know, you'd have little gardens, you know, the Russian Dachnik sort of small garden could be a hectare, it could be as small as 5,000 square feet. So anywhere from 5,000 square feet to 2.5 acres. And then Matt told us about what you're doing, the food farm abundance and the food forest idea. And I thought, oh my God, what a fantastic idea. And this is, I'm not going to continue on much longer, just give me another 30 seconds.
I love it.
The other thing I did, Jim, was I watched a Netflix documentary on Patagonia. And I saw the indigenous people in Patagonia where they would go in, and this is before I talked to Matt, so it's like, you know, it's like
Yeah.
you send this message out to the universe and it comes back to you in like a day or two. And what happened was these indigenous people, they would go into the forest and they would, you know, they'd be in the top of the trees where they would be taking off something from the top of the trees. They'd fall on the forest floor, they'd collect it, and they made bread from the tree. I mean, from the fruit of the tree, whatever kind of fruit it was, whatever kind of tree it was. And just to put, again, a bit of perspective on it, I'm a civil engineer, so the amount I know about food preparation is I like to eat food, and that's about it. But
Yeah.
but I understand that you are an expert, and I know Matt is becoming an expert too. And so there's Sean. Wave hi, Sean. There's Sean. He's interested. Also, speaking again, just personally for myself, I'm very interested because I just purchased a site on an island, a Gulf island off the coast of Vancouver Island. I've got a 10-acre site there, and I got a few other sites that I'm involved with as well. And we were going to do self-sufficient, you know, but again, it would have been a garden as you would think of a traditional garden. Then again, when I heard from Matt, and Sean and I heard from Matt, I thought, oh my God, this is a great, you know, alternative. Sorry to take so long, but over to you, Jim. We want to know more about what you're doing.
Wow. Well, I love it, Bruce. There's so many pieces that I could go off of what you said. The world food supply is in big trouble, as everybody is aware of. The way we have farmed for the last several generations, and even a little bit longer, is incredibly destructive to everything. The cause of the Dust Bowls of the 30s and 40s is unsustainable, ridiculous mining of the soil, which they call agriculture. The ways that we have learned, and I got very passionate about this about 15 years ago. I learned what was going on in the world, and I also learned the solution. And what I'm going to share with you is not a hypothetical solution to all of the world's biggest problems: deforestation, mass extinction, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, hunger, and tyranny. It's a proven solution to all of those problems. And it's a design science called permaculture. Originally, it was permanent agriculture, and now it's even more holistic than that. It's about creating a sustainable, regenerative culture. And this is the vision that is absolutely and logically achievable. The vision of food forests everywhere, where food is literally free for everybody all over the place. It sounds like a big leap, but it's the most logical thing to start doing right now. And when I learned permaculture, I made it my life's obsession, more recently a joyful obsession, right? Because scarcity, obsession is rooted in scarcity. But the joyful obsession that I have now, I'm literally in awe every day watching what this system that we live in, source, nature, God, whatever people choose to call it, it's infinitely abundant. You know, you can count the seeds in a single apple, but you cannot count the apples in a single seed. They're infinite. So what we have, after this many years of asking the question, how can we catalyze a shift in awareness that leads to mass adoption of permaculture, which from a religious perspective, some might call the Garden of Eden, right? How can we inspire mass adoption and empower mass adoption of this practice of using our resources wisely, of using our land and our energy wisely? So after all sorts of time and many iterations, I've created many aquaponic systems and hydroponic systems and fancy greenhouses. I've even created food producing communities in Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and now here in Central Florida. The more I stop trying to outwork and outthink nature, the more simple the solution becomes. In fact, Bill Mollison said this. He said, though the problems of our world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And that one always gets me choked up. So from there, I realized that simply building soil and designing, using the proven permaculture principles, perennial edible landscapes into our landscapes. Now, the difference between an annual and a perennial is substantial. Annuals are all GMOs. Now, they're not the kind of GMOs that use poisons like the Monsanto and the glyphosate and the Bayer and all that stuff. Those are radically toxic to the human body and to our earth. I'm talking about the GMOs that have been kind of changed over time by people putting different plants together, some on purpose and some by accident. And these are wonderful plants. In most cases, they're absolutely awesome, but they take a little bit of maintenance. They take a little bit of extra effort. And we promote the use of these annuals right now for the main reason is that they're quick to production. You can plant tomatoes and you can have tomatoes within 60 days. You can plant cucumbers and squash and pumpkins and peppers and all that stuff. And you can get a very quick return on your time invested. Heck, you can plant sprouts and you can be eating sprouts within a week, or microgreens.
Do you mind if I interrupt you for a second, Jim?
Please do.
So if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat box, and I'll ask Jim and Matt to chirp in here. But one of the things I'm really taken with is I didn't understand it until just now, is that I really liked what Matt told me, I guess last week or early this week. I mean, every day, I can't remember which day it is, but I liked what Matt told me about when he talked about food forests and permaculture. If you think about it, I don't really like to work that hard. I mean, I work hard, but I'd rather work less if I could. And so if you think about a typical garden, you're out there weeding it and feeding it and doing hand watering it or whatever you're doing. Whereas with a food forest, I mean, I suppose if you had an apple tree and a pear tree and whatever else, you just pick the apples and the pears. There's not as much work. But what I just learned from Jim now, which I think is important, is that they're suggesting actually a combination effort, because one of the concerns I had, especially on my Safe Island property, is that think about how long it takes to create an apple orchard or pear tree or whatever. I suspect a food forest is maybe a 10-year project, Jim.
A food forest is forever, and it does take time to come to fruition. In fact, I'm in a food forest now, and I'll take you for a walk out after we get done with some of the chat. I might lose a tiny bit of signal, so I'd like to get kind of the basis down now, and then we'll go out into the food forest. This food forest that's right out the window here, I put that in the ground starting last January. So 11 months ago.
Where are you based out of, Jim?
In Central Florida.
In Central Florida. Your growing season is slightly longer than, say, Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah, slightly, right?
We have 9 months of winter and 3 months of construction.
Yep. And my mom grew up in Minnesota, and they grew without any plumbing or any electricity until she was 15, 16 years old. They grew all of the food they needed on their farm. And I still remember stories of her going into the pasture and picking all the berries that were perennials. And then I have another buddy in off the tip of Lake Superior in northern Minnesota. He has 300 different types of edibles growing permaculture style, perennial plants mostly. And here's the magic of the abundance of God's creation is it's infinite. I asked him, I said, if you walked away from this food forest and came back in 30 years, what would happen? He said, Jim, not only would this be a thriving jungle of food, but what I've done is I've walked into the properties around my property outside of where I planted. And I estimate that 100,000 plants have been planted in the properties around this property because of this property, thanks to the wind and the rain and the animals and the birds that eat the seeds and then go poop. And now we've got a new raspberry or blueberry plant.
So I have another question for you. Again, going back to the Russian Dachnik movement, which is still a very important part of Russian agricultural production. On 1 hectare of land, which is largely hand-tilled and hand, whatever. There's not a lot of machinery involved here, and there's mostly organic, but not all organic. They can feed 4 families.
Yeah.
Probably in North America, you could feed 2 families. In North Americans tend to be a little bigger, but 4 skinny Russian families can survive on a hectare of property done properly, and it's quite intense. If you had a food forest on a hectare, which is you're an American, so 2.5 acres, would you have the same density of food, or would you need more land?
So there are many cases where people feed their whole families on a 1/4 acre of land.
Wow.
So
Okay.
you're talking about 12 1/4 acres for a hectare.
Yeah.
So yes, you could feed easily. You could feed 4 families, and not just any
That's
food,
big.
but it is. I mean, and so like on our property, we just dug another pond, and we just hit a spring, which is so beautiful and fortunate. Because now we'll have a very clear water pond. On our other pond, we put in 14,000 fish, and we then have a solar system that we take, we have a pump, we suck the water out of the pond, and we use the water to fertigate the food forest around the pond. And then when the fruits fall off the trees into the pond and the microbiome eats the fruit, and then things eat that, now you've got a feeder system for the fish. So it's a self-generating factory. It's an abundance factory. And it's all.
Jim, can I share with you in the group just one quick picture?
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned a pond. This is me on Safe Island. I won't disclose the location because it's a private island. But we were on our site on Safe Island, and we own this property and we know it pretty well, but we don't know it as well as we think. And when we're exploring it, my wife and I and a couple of my buddies were on the island. We notice, if you look on the right-hand side here, that it has a water hole.
Yeah.
Right? And as soon as I saw that, I said, well, we're going to call this particular site that my wife and I are working on, we're going to call it Waterhole Ranch.
Love it. That is so beautiful.
And so what I'm hoping to learn from you and from Matt and your team is and the growing season there is a lot longer than Ottawa. This is a warm weather Gulf Island on the west coast of off Seattle, Vancouver, that area. Wintertime temperatures tend to be about 4 degrees to 7 degrees Celsius, so probably 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And summertime temperatures are not that warm either. It's not like South Florida.
Right.
Summertime temperatures are 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, so probably 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. But I'm sure that I know there's 2 different things, Matt: food farm abundance or food forest abundance, and then there's some other terminology you use. Can you remind me what that is?
The Freedom Farm Academies.
Yeah.
Food farm academies and
Freedom Farm Academies.
Okay.
And our company is Food Forest Abundance.
All right. So I'm sure I can learn a lot about it. And I have about 2,500 clients, Jim, in the States and in Canada. There's some are in Mexico and a few overseas, but mostly the States and Canada. And with your permission, I will share this video with my group.
I love it. You have my blessing and my thankfulness to the max, because that's what it takes when we share these solutions with the world. And when we get achieve mass adoption, we're free in every way. So I'll get to the details, if you like, of the Freedom Farm Academy.
Just before we do that, I wanted to, Sean, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, maybe you could describe a little bit about SCORE Academy and the VARS farm, but also I noticed on your property, Sean, that it has some low-lying areas and it has some wetlands. So you could probably do ponds there as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And so, not sure, what would you want to know?
Well, just maybe describe what you're doing with SCORE Academy, and also then some of the ideas that you and I and Matt talked about, just so Jim knows and everybody else knows. You've got the Sports Academy, you've got the farm. Talk a little bit about the Sports Academy, and then what some of the ideas you and I, Matt, talked about for the farm.
Good, awesome. Would you mind if I don't do that on this call?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll share later with you guys.
Okay, not a problem. Let's move on then.
Perfect,
Jim, back to you.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So the Freedom Farm Academy, so everything's kind of a process and evolution of awareness and of thought and learning, and sometimes taking a misstep, like all these greenhouses that I built. So what happened is when we started building our community here in Central Florida, Galt's Landing, after John Galt from Atlas Shrugged, I started inviting people to come take a look at what we were doing. The response I received was phenomenal. People with tears in their eyes and people seeing a path. They were inspired. They saw what was possible for them. And then the next logical step for them was, I want to do this too. So we have all sorts of people coming to this area, and it's like abundance is spreading out through the whole community. People are starting to grow food everywhere, and then their neighbors are starting to grow food, and then their neighbors, and we become part of the supply chain. We inspire by demonstrating, and then we empower by showing them the permaculture principles and the practices. So on lot 1 here, we're doing it throughout the whole community. And we've got beehives, we've got aquaponic systems, we've got completely off-grid solar, we've got wind, we've got all the different functions, even ham radios, which in case the grid goes down, we want to be able to communicate and have a communication network. So we're really being thoughtful of what's possible in our world today and how to solve that. So on lot 1, which is 1.1 acres, we're putting up 3 rental units. We're putting in a school, and we're bringing the kids from the community, and it's a PMA school, a private membership association school. So it does not follow the Common Core curriculum or any of that stuff. And the primary objective of this school is to, number 1, learn how to be self-reliant for the kids and to create their own lunches every day. That will not take long. Within 3 to 4 months, the kids are going to be creating their own food at school. As soon as they accomplish that goal, and kind of along a parallel path, they will be designing their parents' home, their family home, to be completely food self-reliant. So the investment in the child's education for the parent becomes all of the food that they need to thrive at home. When that objective is met, then the kids will go out into the community and start designing and installing food production systems in the general community. And here's the thing, that it's going to be 2 teachers. It's going to be like a little house in the prairie, 1 schoolroom with multiple ages. There's going to be 2 teachers. The teachers are going to make more money than if they were teaching in a public school. The kids are going to learn more relevant information than if they were in a public school. The parents are going to get an incredible return on their investment in their child's education, and everybody wins. We're also creating this kind of area where people can come, and we're bringing in the healing modalities, simple healing modalities like colloidal silver and aquacure and structured water. And of course, just the presence of a food forest, eating healthy, naturally produced food without poisons every day while they're here is going to be a healing. So
Hey,
we're
Jim,
basically,
Jim,
yeah.
I just want to tell you a funny story, just to break it up a little bit.
Awesome.
Here in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, Washington, D.C., obviously the capital of the states, and Ottawa is the capital of Canada. It's not Montreal or Toronto, it's Ottawa. And we have an authority here called the National Capital Commission, and they own a lot of land, and they run many parts of our city. So the National Capital Commission has on their land, growing naturally, all kinds of fruit trees and other things. And some kids and adults were in the on NCC property, and they were harvesting acorns for something, maybe decoration, and they were harvesting some fruit. Hey, there's an apple, there's a pear, whatever, there's an orange, maybe. I'm not sure oranges grow, but in Ottawa, but certainly pears and apples do. And they got arrested. And
that's the governmente for us.
That's the government, I mean, I just had to inject that as a note it's sad and pathetic, but it's also kind of funny. I mean, we're talking about, I know there was a picture of a 6-year-old girl and a 4-year-old girl, like tiny little children, being literally escorted by NCC police officers in full body armor and, with weapons. They had pistols, because they had, fruit from government, and what happens to the fruit, of course, as you know, is it falls on the ground. The only creatures that eat it are God's creatures, the birds and the squirrels and whatever else. But they got arrested, and it was absolutely awful. Janelle is asking Jim, because maybe some of us are having trouble, visualizing this. Could you actually show us what you've done out back?
I can walk around right now, and I'll share a couple more details.
So
the Freedom Farm Academy model is basically, it's a homestead that produces all the food, water, and energy that you desire on site. And it's also a demonstration and education model that has many, many layers of value, which in a true capitalist society, which is based in the voluntary exchange of value, it's a valuable thing to have, especially during food supply chain costs. So it's a business model. It's a homestead that turns into what we believe to be the most valuable business model that we can imagine in the world right now. Everybody wins. So see this sand here? 11 months ago, this area was all sand.
Wow.
Can you hear me?
Sort of.
Okay. So this is sea cover. This is like a little guild here. This is perennial peanut, and it's good soil. And then we've got different types, about 220 different types of edible and medicinal plants. This is a toilet paper plant. This is cranberry, hibiscus, and turmeric, and yucca, and look at all the bananas. So I'm standing, there's a butterfly. There were no butterflies here 6-7 months ago. Now there are butterflies everywhere. There's life everywhere. So now in a normal community, the HOA is a liability. It's an expense. The land is looked at as a liability. In our HOA, our land is an asset, right? Like here's 2 types of perennial spinaches. This is longevity spinach because it helps you live a long time. And here's Okinawa spinach. Look at this beautiful purple leaf. So this is salad. If you mix this with some moringa, some of you have heard of moringa, right? You mix this into a bowl, you put some dressing on it. It's the healthiest salad you could ever have. And there are perennial spinaches in your zone as well. And that's what permaculture does. It first says, what zone are we in? And then it matches the right plants based on the zone, and it then creates diversity. Like if you look all around me, diversity is the key to the strength of the system. Now, you see how the leaves are all ripped up? We had a hurricane come through, and the hurricane ripped up the banana leaves, but the new banana leaves are coming out. Isn't that amazing? And what I find even more amazing is we have a solar panel that had concrete footings and steel bars over here. The solar panels got ripped up, but the banana leaves, the bananas are fine. So you can see, in fact, we just put in a solar water pump system. And I'll see if I can get signal over here. This system has it has a well, and then a solar panel system, and then an automated system. So it comes on an hour per day per zone, unless it's raining. And if it's raining, it senses that and it doesn't come on. So here's the off-grid solar system. And by the way, in the business model of the Freedom Farm Academy, we demonstrate all of the products that it takes to be free, and then we become affiliates of these products. So if somebody says, I want one of those off-grid solar systems, we say, great, call this person, here's our network link, and we get 5% or 10% or whatever the percentage is for making the referral. And again, everybody wins. All right, any questions so far?
Jim, while you're touring us around, Janelle, one of my clients in Florida, probably not too far from where Jim is now, is developing a tiny house town with, I can't remember how many units, but quite a few units. And one of the things that I'm encouraging him to do is to combine, the tiny house town with workshops where people can have some kind of trade and they have a place to live. That's a good combination. But the other thing that I'm strongly encouraging him to include is, backyard homesteading.
Yeah.
Because it's an obvious thing to add. And of course, backyard homesteading to me has always meant really basically gardening, not having a food forest. And so now I'm gonna switch a little bit or pivot a bit. And I know you're interested in the tiny house town for Canada, but to me, the workshop idea, the tiny house, and the food forest, it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, it does. In fact, we've got 3 tiny homes going up right over here, and those are going to be used as rentals. And by the way, we imagine that we are going to be full because people are already asking us if they could stay in abundance. So, and we've got an incredible network. We have a production, a feature-length film that we are going to soon be doing. We have an incredible network of influencers that are going to be living in Freedom Farm Academies and studioing out of them. And then we're going to be promoting. We're basically creating a promotional network that includes several Emmy Award winners, because this is the idea whose time has come. This is the one idea stronger than all of the armies of the world. Right here is just using our land and our minds and our resources wisely.
Yeah, so Jim, a number of questions are coming up on the chat box. And can this work? Does food forest work in colder climates? And Janelle, I know it does. I mean, Jim is going to, I'm sure, back that up, and so will Matt. But even in not northern Quebec, but even in sort of mid-north Quebec, you can have a food forest. It is different than what you would find in Florida. You probably won't find bananas and oranges there, but you will find food that will sustain you. Indigenous people have been living in Canada and the northern states for probably 30,000 years. Guillaume, you could comment on that. And they have had a diet of berries, nuts, and they've been using the food forest, which were basically, they went from sea to sea to sea in North America before the white folks came and basically decimated the forest and bird life and many other aspects of it. So I do think whether you're in Moosonee or you're in Belleville, Ontario, or or even in fairly far northern parts of Quebec, you can do this. Guillaume, how long have Indigenous people been living in North America? It's got to be 30,000 years.
Well, I don't know how long, but like from creation, what they like the white man say the natives immigrated to the land like 30,000 years ago or something. But from the stories of creation I heard from the natives is that they've always been there since creation.
Yeah,
And
that would
I've
be a
had
long time.
I've had the chance to walk in the bush with the natives, and they say like, hey, this plant was used, you can boil and make soup with it. This plant you can use to make a diaper. This plant is used to during our moon phase for the women. This tree is going to give you water any day of the year. Like during the winter, you can just do a cut and it's going to give you water.
You know what? The most important thing I learned today was from Jim when he said this plant is the toilet paper plant. No more shortages of toilet paper in pandemics.
Exactly. I wish I could share this with you. If you come to visit, I sure will.
I'm coming, brother. I'm coming. I started my journey on my bike. I'm gonna traverse to the US soon, and I'll be there in a year or something.
Awesome. We'll have a spot for you.
Just so everybody knows, Guillaume is not going to admit it. Guillaume plans to take a horseback journey from Canada through the States to Mexico, and he's going to follow the pathways of the Indigenous folks. He's not going down a fucking highway. Excuse my language, everybody. He's going to take the the paths that the Indigenous followed when they would do their mass migrations, and he said it might take 2 years, it might take 5 years.
Awesome. That is so awesome. I can't wait to see you, buddy. My friends, here's some figs. It's just so joyful. It's so joyful doing this and then sharing it with others. I've never been more motivated, more happy in my life than in being involved in this process. And I want to say something too. I've never grown a tree in my life. I just give the tree a home and the tree grows itself.
So just everyone, you should know a couple of things. I put in the chat box just now a video that I put on YouTube for Jim and for Matt with their permission. It's called Freedom Farm Academy from Food Forest Abundance. There's a YouTube link. It's about a 5-minute film, Janelle, and everybody that really explains what Matt and Jim are doing. And it really is a great explanation and how it works. What I like about this, and Jim, I hope you'll back me up on this, and you too, Matt, and that is nothing is sustainable unless it's also economically sustainable.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is what I find in this industry, and maybe I shouldn't call it an industry, but in a way it is, in this industry is there's a lot of people with very good will, but they don't pay any attention to the economics of it. And again, going back to Indigenous cultures, which I know something about, I don't think you know this, Guillaume, I lived with the Hopi people in Four Corners in the United States when I was a young man. And I know something about Indigenous culture. I'm not Indigenous, but I know a little bit about it from living with these people. And what I was going to say is that Indigenous culture was sustainable because it was economically sustainable and we're talking about for 30,000 years. Maybe it's longer, I don't know, but at least 30,000 years. And if people are starving, as they are perhaps now in Ukraine, and they're freezing, certainly, they will do anything to feed their families, anything. I have 5 kids. I know what I'm talking about. I would do anything to support my children. And other men and women are the same. They'll do anything. So if you think that something can be beautiful, but doesn't have to have an economic engine to it, you're mistaken, because you'll just destroy the country. If you look at the Dominican Republic, On one side of the island is the Dominican Republic, a flourishing society. On the other side is Haiti, which is almost certainly the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti decided to allow people to deforest the country. Every country that has deforested itself, whether you're talking about Palestine or you're talking about Haiti, ends up in abject poverty, right? When the rains come in Haiti, it doesn't grow anything, it just causes mudslides and people die and animals die. So what I really admire about what Jim and Matt have done in their team is they've given a lot of thought to how you do a food forest. And they talked about perennials, so you're not buying seeds from Monsanto or anybody else. You're talking about something that's sustainable, both from an environmental point of view and an economic point of view. Did I put words in your mouth, Jim?
You nailed it, buddy. You absolutely nailed it. Let's
All
look
right,
at the
good.
return on investment on this one papaya tree. It cost us maybe $15 to put this tree in the ground, right? Because we bought it maybe a 1.5 feet tall. Now you could grow it by seed, and then you could go to the store and get a papaya. You could save the seed, and now you can grow a papaya tree. But how much are these papayas worth about 9-10 months later, maybe a year? Well, it's probably 9 or 10 months later. That right there, based on the pounds of organic papayas, that's probably $100 and some worth of papaya right there within
right.
12 months. Yeah.
All right, so let's ask everybody to unmute themselves. Come on, Woody and Sean and Simon and Janelle and Guillaume. Just everybody unmute yourself for the last few minutes of our chat here. And let's ask Matt and Jim questions, not just here from me. Janelle, why don't you kick it off, Janelle? You have to unmute yourself.
I was literally about to say that I have construction in the basement, so if it gets loud, I'll mute myself.
Thank you.
I think this is amazing. Talking about abundance and starting from scratch and growing it to the potential that it can. See, yeah, the la vis is going, but anyways, yeah, no, I think this is amazing, and it would be really interesting to see what kind of model we could mimic for the Ottawa region, or like you said, Quebec or Ottawa region. I just took down all the resources from the chat, and I'll be doing a bit more research about it. So
Janelle, one of the things that you should probably look at is, and I'm sure Jim, you're familiar with it, is there's a documentary on Netflix called The Biggest Little Farm.
Yes.
And this young couple, I'll just give you a quick synopsis. This young couple, nice young couple, are living in Los Angeles in a tiny apartment, and they pick up a stray dog, and it's a wonderful dog. He's such a great animal. It becomes part of the family, right? And the young woman was told that she could not have children, so they have a dog. You know, the dog becomes your kid, I guess, in a way. So they're living in this apartment. The dog's wonderful company for them. But when they go to work, which is a long commute, and they don't make that much money, they live in a shitty apartment, you know, the dog barks all day. So the landlord comes along and says, hey, either you get out or the dog gets out. There's no choice. So they decide, to hell with you and to hell with LA, and they buy this farm outside of LA, about 80 kilometers, or maybe it's 80 miles, northeast of Los Angeles. And it's supposed to be, and it's a lot like the land that Jim showed earlier. You go there, if you had a friggin' pickaxe, you couldn't, it was like hitting concrete. There was no water, it was like barren. And over the next 7 years, with the help of a mentor, they turned this into a natural oasis of where it's a food farm, a food forest, and more. And they use natural predators. You know, they don't have a lot of chemicals and fertilizers and insecticides and pesticides and fungicides and whatever other sides you could think of. And it's about an hour and 15 minutes. And what's really cool about it is somehow or other, when she's on the farm living with her husband now and the dog and the other animals and wild nature, she gets pregnant and has a beautiful little boy. So it's a sweet, sweet story. It's a lovely story, but it does tell me that people want to get back to the Garden of Eden. People want to get back to Shangri-La. I don't know if you know the film Lost Horizon. Everybody has that same dream. And Janelle, if you do produce a tiny house town, it shouldn't just be a bunch of friggin' trailers parked in a parking lot. You know, that to me is not the idea here. It's something that's really self-sufficient, or much more self-sufficient than we're used to. Anyway, that's my plug for The Biggest Little Farm. Jim, did you see the film?
Yes, fantastic film.
Great film.
Yeah, I've saw it as well. There's actually a second part out of it as well now.
I didn't see the second part. Which one is that, Matt?
There's their 1.5 hour long movie, and then
Yeah.
they've got an additional like 45-minute part that came out, I believe, this year.
And one of the things I wanted to say about The Biggest Little Farm, Janelle, for you and everybody else on the call, or people who will watch this video, is that their cost of labor on the farm was negative. How the hell do you have negative cost labor? People would, from all over the world, from Sweden, from the United Kingdom, from France, from all over the place, would come and pay to stay at The Biggest Little Farm, and learn everything they could about having a food forest and their own organic farm, because there's a lot of learning there, and they would pay. So the cost of labor on the farm, they made a profit that way. Does that make any sense, Janelle?
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people do that. They stay for free and then they actually provide their own labor in exchange.
And I taught a couple of an architect, a young woman by the name of Dachnik, and she wanted to build straw bale homes. And so she bought a property in rural Quebec, a beautiful property with a couple of lakes. It wasn't very expensive because it's literally in the middle of nowhere. And people will pay her to come and build straw bale homes for her, which she then puts on Airbnb. So they pay for a course to learn how to do straw bale homes. So her cost of labor in building these marvelous homes is negative, right? So there's a lot we can do to have a sustainable economic engine in these communities. And at the same time, we're producing better settlements, basically.
And I think the people that are the type of personality that would like the tiny home living are all about the outdoors. I'm sorry. But sustainability and farming is part of that.
Well, as you know, I have some people in tiny homes living on properties I own, and all of them, I think, have backyard homesteads, partly because I encourage them to do it, and they like doing it. They all have hobbies or side hustles. They all have that. I've got one tiny home operator. He makes, in fact, I probably have one. He sells these. He makes these pens. They look like any other pen, but they're actually made out of wood, and they're very nice to hold. And he sells them like crazy. He makes them in his workshop. And his wife makes jewelry, and they have a backyard homestead. That's the kind of person. And listen to this, everybody. This particular couple, he also has a regular job as a project manager for a local construction company, and she works in, naturally, a jewelry store. So they have about $140,000 or $145,000 a year family income. So they're not poor. They have a $55,000 tiny home that they built themselves. They park it on one of my properties. They only pay me $500 a month. I probably should have charged them more. They have a backyard homestead, and they have more money than I do. I mean, they're always going on fancy trips. Where are you going now? Oh, we're going here, we're going there. So, Janelle, the tiny house movement, the motto is less house, more life. And I think they're onto something, and I'm a little jealous, to be honest with you. Okay, enough for me. Greg, Woody, anybody, Simon, Sean, do you have any more questions? Guillaume? Well, this is our last opportunity. We've got a few more minutes.
Hey, Bruce. Hey, Jim, Matt, thanks very much for this very informative. And I'm based out of Ottawa, right down the street from Bruce, essentially. And this is beyond interesting to me. I recently purchased a property, and I'm starting to think of this in the context of a little bit more of a northern climate as well. But I love the concept behind all of this, and the fact that it needs an economic engine to be sustainable. I mean, these are some of the things that really resonate with me. So we'll be in touch, and I will follow this very, very closely. I want to thank you right now for the time you spent with me and us this afternoon. So thanks a lot.
Oh, you're so welcome. And so I want to share a little bit about our incredible team. We've got an a design network around the world, permaculture designers. And that is the foundation is design. Everything starts with a thoughtful design that goes through all of the details. And that is the best investment because it'll increase the yield massively while decreasing the labor. It's about energy transfer. So with a little bit of energy invested up front, the return on that energy invested is substantial. And then we also have the support network. And by the way, on the Freedom Farm Academy, 5% of the gross goes to the team to support all of the different elements of the Freedom Farm Academy. So it's a relatively tiny amount relative to the value that we add.
Fantastic.
And just so everybody knows here, we've also been working with a number of developers. One in specific, Bruce, will be kind of relevant for you. This is on Vancouver Island in the Cowichan Valley. This gentleman has Elk Ridge Estates. His name's David Salmon, and he's going to be doing roughly 350 homes there with design for the common areas and food forests there, as well as putting some of the cost of doing a design into the acquisition of the lot. So everybody basically who buys a lot will also have a food forest design included in that purchase for them to then put their house on and then implement their food forest on that property. So he's one example. We've got a number in Central America. We have a private island that's going to be 30,000 homes off the coast of Africa. We're helping on the master planning of that. We've got one in Thailand. So we've definitely realized there's opportunity there with the developers, both with full-size houses as well as the tiny homes, and going after that market. So we can support anybody there.
Fantastic. All right, anybody else?
Yes, me.
Go, Guillaume.
Well, guys, thank you so much for the work you're doing for Mother Earth. It was so cool being on your podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I'm glad to see you guys are doing fantastic and working with Bruce as well. I love Bruce. I'm your #1 fan, Bruce.
I love it.
Thanks,
So
Gale.
tonight I'm adding to Serpent River First Nation, which is a reserve, and I don't like the word reserve because that's horrible, so I call it a village. There's an industry that wants to install there, and they're going to contaminate the water, so they're having a meeting, the community tonight, about that. And I'm going to be sharing about the vision I had when I was fasting 2 months ago on the reserve at Thunder Mountain, and sharing about the vision of a wildlife sanctuary where we can protect the land, protect the waters, protect the animals, and protect the population as well. Because right now there's deforestation, mining of uranium, the trailing ponds left behind cause cancer and are killing the environment. So I want to talk about that and share them about the dream I have, the vision, and see if the community is on board. Work with you guys. I'm going to talk about Bruce. I'm going to talk about forest food abundance, and we'll bring the community together. Because a friend said, to stop the mining right now, why don't we just go camp there and just be there, right? As Native people, you can protect the land this way. That's the way the natives, they know, right? But I said, now you're putting the community against you. The government doesn't like you stopping the industries, and the people are losing jobs in the mine, and now they're against you. Why don't we create this vision of a wildlife sanctuary, and we bring ecotourism, and we create jobs by growing hemp and working in textiles, so we can create clothes. And now we offer jobs, and now we talk the language of politicians where they want jobs, tourism, and we got everybody on board. So
yes.
I'm excited to have you guys around.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to fight the existing reality. We want to build a better reality that makes it obsolete.
Yeah, right on. So we're gonna have, I hear there's 13,000 hectares of land that we can get to do a small garden, build a traditional village.
Yeah,
Feed the
so
people,
cool.
feed the people, bring bisons. We can have a bison farm, grow the food. Oh, it's gonna be good.
Wow, sounds amazing.
So one last thing I'm going to show everybody is I drew this very sophisticated plan here. Okay, this took hours and hours for me to perfect. So I did a subdivision design. I built many subdivisions, Jim and Matt and everybody. So here's a road, and here's another road, and here are some houses, single family homes, the driveways. All right. What I did in one subdivision I designed was I said, you cannot build any fences. You can't put any hedges here, no fences. All right. So what you ended up with is, and this is registered on title, you ended up with an enormous area back here that is like a communal space.
Wow.
It's privately owned, but there are no fences, no hedges. And so for many years, if you're sitting on your backyard deck, your kids can run across and play with the kids over here or over there. So lately, Matt, where's Matt? There he is, and Jim. So lately, when I went back to visit this subdivision, it's about 25 years old now. Guess what they're doing there? I'll give you one guess, Jim.
Fences.
Nope, not permitted.
Oh, they're growing food. Oh, they're growing
food.
Oh,
So
that's great.
a number of them have gotten together. They don't know anything about food forests yet because I've only learned about it the last few days, but they certainly are going to hear from me as the developer about turning at least part of that space into a food forest, which would be a wonderful place for kids to go and get up to mischief, you know.
Yeah.
But also a wonderful place to produce food. So, you know, think about it. I mean, this is not rocket science, right? It's about changing people's expectations, changing people's way of thinking, because most people think, I want, you know, a quarter acre, an eighth of an acre, and a single family house, and I want a big fence around it, and that's it, and I don't want to know my neighbors. Well, that's one way of living, I guess. But there are other alternatives. And so people who want more of a community will go to places like this. People who want, you know, a gated community will go to gated communities. All right. So I want everybody who's watching this video or participating today to be thinking in a bigger way. And I'm not saying that we have to have only one style, one lifestyle. There's all kinds. Some people want to live in a 30-story building downtown. Not me, but I understand that people do want that. And that's fine. I get that. You know, think about Hong Kong and the number of tall buildings they have there. I would hate that. I have one client in Shanghai who lives in a micro suite, and the micro suite is 185 square feet. All right, 3 men live in there. They've got 2 bunk beds on one side, 1 bunk bed on the other side. 185 square feet. That's the size of my office plus a little bit more. And you know, I mean, Shanghai is Shanghai. It's a very busy and expensive place to live. So 3 men share this 185 square foot micro suite. But that, again, that wouldn't be my choice. So all I'm saying is that we should give people more choices, and certainly we need to think about food security and sustainability. Jim, to you, thank you. Matt, as always, a pleasure to see you. Janelle, Greg, Sean, Guillaume, be safe. Simon, everybody, see you later. Bye,
Thank
Sean.
you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Looking forward to hearing from you. All right, ciao.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys. That was great.